Heads up, this theory requires intimate understanding of the Fazbear Fright series, the Stitch Wraith, and the Man in Room 1280. Please review those before proceeding. Let's talk FNAF 4. Ever since that game dropped over 7 years ago, the theorist community has been driven in absolute circles by just how clingy it's been about its secrets. After all this time, you'd think we'd at least have seen what was in the box, but nope, not even when Scott brought that back, not just in FNAF World, but for Fury's Rage, strangely. Aside from that, when you think about it, how much do we really know about FNAF 4? We've come pretty far in the last 7 years since the game's release, but a lot of that has just left us with much bigger questions. We know for a fact that the crying child saw something, and that he's afraid of Fredbear's golden suits because of what he saw, but we've never really known the why or what of it. On top of that, we've also got rumors of animatronics coming to life at night and hiding your body away if they get to you, being spread around by the neighborhood children. For years, many people, including myself, had thought that this may have been referring to either William causing the missing children's incident at Spring Bonnie, or perhaps those spirits coming alive within their own animatronics, but one small issue with that is that none of that has even happened yet. With the confirmation of Into the Pit being canon to the games through the Stitch Wraith stingers, it's pretty undeniable that the missing children's incident happens in 1985, leaving the question of what the local children are rumoring about unsolved. Aside from that, we probably shouldn't forget about the other 90% of FNAF 4, the main night sequences. Straight up, what even are these things? At a first glance, it appears that we're just a kid in a bedroom working to fend off our nightmares of the Fazbear Band, but even that conclusion is thrown up in the air by the absolute bombshell that was Sister Location's private room and breaker room map. In simplest terms, these nightmare sequences are directly connected to the Afton Robotics facility, allowing for William to control the experience from his private room, testing what we assume to be illusion disc technology, in the form of the nightmare animatronics on a human victim, but that still leaves us wondering who. The obvious answer would be the crying child. A majority of FNAF 4 was about him after all. Well, even if that were to work narratively, the crying child being the experiment victim simply creates a heck of a lot more problems than answers. Why would William choose to experiment on his own son? Why doesn't the crying child tell anyone about this? And how would William feasibly drag his own kid down to these rooms each night? We see that the crying child still treats Freddy and the gang like his friends, which he certainly wouldn't be doing if he was being tormented by them every night. So again, we're left generally empty-handed. There's always been the idea that Michael might be our protagonist. After all, he does draw Nightmare Fredbear into his survival logbook, so why couldn't he fit the bill? Well, what's distinct about Michael's nightmares from the observation rooms is that he's not actually in the physical rooms. Considering there's no way Michael was a kid when he made that drawing of Nightmare Fredbear, or even had the logbook at that age, the nightmares he experiences are probably being caused by someone or something else, meaning that there had to be someone, a real person, that was subjected to the real rooms at some point. Do you see a bit of the problem now? On one hand, we know about a lot of what went on in FNAF 4, and how none of it's really meaningless, but it's still incredibly difficult to tie together and understand. At least, that was until Fazbear Frights wrapped up, finally giving us the pieces we needed to put this whole thing to rest, and it all starts with Andrew. Andrew was a pivotal character first introduced in the Stitch Wraith and later featured in The Man in Room 1280. Andrew, a supposed victim of Williams, is described as having black curly hair and a devilish grin. During his time with Jake in the Stitch Wraith, we learned that Andrew is an extremely angry and vengeful child. In The Man in Room 1280, we hear about how Andrew had latched onto William's soul in order to keep him alive following the FNAF 6 fire and torment him during his time at Heracles Hospital. But that's about all the background we're really given for Andrew. The problem with Andrew is that he doesn't just play a pivotal role in the Stitch Wraith, but opens a whole nother can of worms by being a victim of Williams, which we know scarcely little about. We know that he had to have been murdered by William at some early point on the timeline, but things like when that happened or why he's so vengeful are never given a good explanation. At least, not in the books. Think back to another one of FNAF's most ambiguous minigames, Midnight Motorist. Midnight Motorist was undoubtedly the first minigame to absolutely stump the theorist community since FNAF 4, fittingly. The game seemed to feature a strangely orange-colored man driving home to find someone sitting at the TV and another someone who locked their bedroom, having run off to that place again. On the surface, it would make sense for this to be the Afton family, with William coming home in his signature purple car to find Michael watching TV at the couch and the crying child having run off to a Fazbear restaurant, but there's always been a few problems with that. Aside from William being conspicuously orange, something that I think goes over a lot of people's heads is the discrepancy between the Midnight Motorist house and the Afton household. While we know that the Afton household is both in a populated neighborhood and extremely close to Fredbear's, the Midnight Motorist house is generally out in the middle of nowhere, seemingly situated in an open area surrounded by trees. Another small detail that again throws everything up in the air is a strange set of footprints situated outside of the child's window, making coming to a conclusion a heck of a lot more complicated. Even if you think the crying child chose to break his window and run off to Fredbear's, which I did think for a while, that still doesn't explain the set of footprints outside his window. Even assuming that this was the crying child eliminates basically all involvement from William. After all, for what conceivable reason would he abduct his own child, only to act surprised later when he discovered them missing? Trying to fit the crying child into any situation where William is responsible for something that happens to him, be it his at-night abduction or experimentation, always ends in a lot more questions than answers. So if this can't be the crying child, might there be another mystery child out there with an overly ambiguous backstory to fill the role of Runaway Child? Well, it turns out we were just talking about one not too long ago. Is it possible that the reason Andrew was never given a backstory in Fazbear Frights is because it had been laid out almost 4 years prior? Is it possible that Andrew is our runaway kidnapped child? At first, the idea sounded pretty absurd. After all, what association would a relatively new character have with such an old minigame? But once you really start putting the pieces together, the big picture becomes surprisingly clear. Picture this. Andrew was a kid with a pretty bad home life, and more than likely was often beaten by his alcoholic father. To escape this, Andrew often ran off to Fredbear's family diner in the middle of the night, breaking through his bedroom window into the nearby woods. William had noticed Andrew often appearing at Fredbear's alone, and he knew that nobody would really bat an eye if the runaway child suddenly disappeared one night. William knew that Andrew was the perfect target, and one night, he went to Andrew's home in a golden costume, luring him to what he'd assumed to be Fredbear's where he'd run off to previous nights, though Andrew would never be seen again. Later that night, Andrew's father would return home after a night of drunk driving. Earlier, he had been kicked out of the local bar after causing a scene and was not allowed re-entry. Andrew's father would assume that he had just run off to Fredbear's like nights prior, but the footprints of an animal mascot left in the rain would tell a very different story. I'm absolutely aware of what would be considered red herring connections between the Midnight Motorist family and the Aftons, like the gray couch potato and purple car driving father, but something about this fits together far too cleanly to just be tossed out. If this were all true, the story of Andrew would be much deeper and more tragic than we first thought, but that still begs the question, what did William need Andrew for, and what happened to him? Well, some of you might have picked up on one of Andrew's key characteristics mentioned in the Stitch Wraith. Andrew is vengeful. So vengeful, in fact, that he chose to keep William alive after the FNAF 6 fire, only to torment him as long as possible in his time in Heracles Hospital. Andrew isn't just inflicting random pain on William. He's the vengeful spirit, the one responsible for creating the living hell that is Ultimate Custom Night for William, a place where he'd be subjected to the monsters Andrew threw at him, unable to escape in any way. Does that sound reminiscent of anything? UCN isn't just some random hellscape of Andrew's, it's his payback for William doing the exact same thing to him over 50 years ago. What I'm proposing is that Ultimate Custom Night is a recreation of the FNAF 4 experience, making Andrew the original victim of the observation rooms. Ever wondered why Nightmare Fredbear and Nightmare are so pivotal to UCN? Why there's one that William shouldn't have killed? Why there's one spirit so much more vengeful than the rest? It's because it's been Andrew, a spirit hellbent on making William suffer for what he did to him. Every time we've booted up FNAF 4, we haven't been greeted by the Afton household, but instead a lone house surrounded by trees. Andrew's house. All of this almost feels poetic in a way. To quote the words of William, it's bittersweet but fitting. After luring Andrew away from his house, William must have forcefully taken him down to the Afton Robotics facility rather than bringing him to Fredbear's like Andrew was hoping. Perhaps due to his disappearance, rumors started spreading amongst local kids. Rumors of golden suits coming to life at night and never telling anyone where they hid your body. Perhaps what the crying child had witnessed wasn't the death of his sister, Charlie, or even the missing children's incident like so many of us have thought for all these years, but instead was the kidnapping of Andrew. What is seen in shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. The crying child wouldn't know that he was witnessing his own father kidnapping a child. He'd think this was one of the golden suits having just killed someone, and would that not be terrifying? If you had seen one of these golden characters kidnapping someone, you'd be absolutely mortified, and that's exactly the state we see the crying child in at Fredbear's Family Diner. He's scared that the same thing that happened to Andrew is going to happen to him. And to top it all off, the twist is that William knows this. He knows that the crying child witnessed his kidnapping, so he instills a plan to make sure his secret won't get out. William creates the Fredbear plush and a series of cameras dotted all about the neighborhood to keep an eye on his son. By doing this, William is able to manipulate the crying child, amplifying his fears and worries over what might happen to him if he's ever caught by one of the golden characters. In my opinion, it's perfect. It's almost too perfect, and I'm not just saying that because it's something I'm putting out here. For once, I actually feel really satisfied with FNAF 4, and really understand what it might have been trying to say all this time a lot better. Is there really any way we could have known all this back when the game first launched? Absolutely not, but it still means something that we can come to these sorts of brand new conclusions 7 years later. If you're still caught up on questions like what happened to Andrew after he died, when did he latch onto William's soul, why does Michael experience nightmares decades later, and most importantly, what are Andrew's connections to Golden Freddy, stay tuned for part 2. I hope what I've said today strikes a chord with you, but until next time, have a good day, night, or wherever you are out there.